Hello guys, welcome back. I wanted to do a video for you all today, short and sweet hopefully, about codependency. Hopefully there won't be too much background noise here. I drove today to check out a hiking trail because I had some time off, and no wonder I haven't heard about that trail very much because it's horrible. Not a good hiking trail in my opinion. It's in the middle of all the wild animals and bears and hogs and everything else, so in the middle of nowhere, and they don't let you carry, if you know what I mean, so not a good idea. So I'm walking out here today, so just wanted to give a little bit of information that I feel like is very timely as far as the end times and where we're at and relationship abuse. I may do some of that from time to time because part of being in the battles of the end time wars, a huge part of it is relationships with each other, unfortunately. And first of all, I wanted to quote, I think his name is Quentin, I forget his name, but he's on Associate Direct channel or ASSC Direct channel, and he says, for any of you guys who are being discarded or rejected and feel rejected in your situation, which rejection is always an illusion, just FYI, it's a lie, it's a trick. But it takes a lot of deep study to really see that. And it takes a lot of drawing really close to God also, that not only is man's rejection God's protection, as many people say, but Associate Direct has an awesome quote for you guys. You may have heard him say this, and I've heard other channels repeating him because it's such a good concept. It's so truthful, that the one who does, especially the narcissistic discard, where they didn't really care about you at all and they're dumping you away like a piece of garbage to go on to a new shiny object, and that sort of scenario, at least it's pretty clear cut what they're doing so that you can grieve and move on and know that it's not about you. The 4 things you don't do, DEEP, I think Dr. Romani says, you don't, as much as possible, you don't defend yourself, you don't explain, you don't engage with them as much as possible, and you don't personalize anything. Nothing is personal about it. And I mean, there may be case by case where it's a time and place to do 1 or 2 of those things, but for the most part, that's what you avoid doing. Defending yourself, explaining yourself, engaging with them, or personalizing anything. But back to the quote that Quentin says that's so great about being dumped like a piece of garbage, a very wicked thing that this person will have to answer for, just to be honest. In the judgments that's coming, that needs to be our focus more than ever for anyone, is the judgment. So his quote is that when this person, especially in the process in which they have deceived you, tricked you, lured you in, used you up for their own personal gain completely, and then throw you aside like a piece of garbage, is that they will look for you everywhere. They may not know what they're even doing, but they will look for you everywhere, and they're never going to be able to find you. And I'm totally paraphrasing his quote there. But they will look for you everywhere, and they will never be able to find you. And of course, it may be deceptive for a long time. That's why we have skilled tactics of staying away, blocking and focusing elsewhere. The focus is all the key. Focus, focus, focus. I have coaching on that in my book, if you guys want to check that out in the description box. And if you want to go for some awesome good free coaching, go to Narcology Unscripted channel. And so the person who will dump you like a piece of trash, they didn't appreciate you for what you were, and that's kind of like the curse they're under, whether they ever met you or not, is they'll always be looking for that thing, and they'll never be able to find it, because God provided it. You were a great source of love and everything. They threw you away. I wanted to share that really quick. So what I wanted to really make this video about mostly is some very strategic end time tips on codependency. What people are saying is going on with codependency, but I think it's a little bit deeper. I think I've been shown some things that have to do with our times. I hope the wind is not tearing up the microphone, by the way. But a lot of people say, and I haven't really studied in depth a lot of books or anything about what the psychologists are saying that codependency is, and as much as an excessive need to an excessive deficit. I think Dr. Ross Rosenberg says an excessive deficit of self-love, and always needing to provide for that other person and take care of that other person above anything else, to the point of sacrificing yourself, to the point of damage to the entire relationship. Nothing about it is healthy. It's just a terrible vortex going on there, with the energy going in one direction and both people becoming more and more unhealthy. I would also like to point out also the idolatry there. The narcissist has become an idol in their own mind. So whenever we have to give and give to the narcissist, and there's all sorts of traps that we want to save them, because there's tricks there of, we can see the child that was injured and everything that happens there. We're deep into the end time, so there's a lot of wickedness that's been going on for generations now. So the narcissist can sometimes look completely helpless in a lot of ways, and they do need help, but that's where we have to understand only God can help them. Anyone else that gets involved is not going to help the situation. So, but the codependency a lot of people talk about is to do with that, the deficit of self-love, the overgiving to the more narcissistic person, and not having good boundaries, not being selfish and strong enough, not being assertive enough. And a lot of people will say it has to do with childhood wounds, that somehow you have a childhood wound there that's making you not strong enough and not selfish enough, you could say, or healthy enough and understanding enough. But I would say there's a few more deeper things going on there with what people are calling codependency. I've never felt like the definition was complete, and I still don't, even though I believe I've been shown a few things. But in case this helps anyone, if you feel like you're under abuse and you're addicted to it, because it's an addiction, either way, a lot of, I believe, what's going on with this so-called codependency, people will say, oh, you have a childhood wound that needs to heal. That's not always the full story. Some of the story is not understanding spiritual matters, because we're into the end times. We haven't been taught this enough. You could say that is not understanding the idolatry of the narcissist, to reject it, not understanding the fear of God and hell, to stand very firmly against that sort of idolatry, no matter what it looks like. Those things not being in our church. That should be our school. Our primary school is the church, the school of life, where we learn all these things in depth. Ooh, it's windy that way. Gonna turn. So we should have the spiritual understanding so deep about the fear of God and hell and idolatry that we recognize a narcissist, even if they're in church, even if they're leading church or singing or Sunday school, or if they seem to know a lot about the Bible. We should be able to pinpoint that as a form of deep idolatry, fear of God, and get away, no matter what they look like spiritually. We shouldn't be caught up in analyzing, which we'll do, because we're trying to find any good left, and there's no good left at a lot of places but God alone. Possibly what he's having us do for elderly or children. But I can understand we're caught up in trying to hyper-analyze and try to sift out and sort out, is there any good anywhere that I can have with anyone and build anything good? That's how we'll a lot of times get caught up in trying to find something good in what I call the trash piles of razor blades, that we keep getting cut up, sifting through all the razor blades of the trash piles, trying to find something, sadly. But that's a lot of how we become codependent, has to do with what time we're in and how deep into evil everyone is. How there's idolaters everywhere that we don't even recognize. We have not been separating out from among them enough. So being deep in the end times, we have a harder time with discernment, because we can't recognize idolaters, and we can't have the fear of God to get away from idolaters. And there's nothing but idolaters a lot of times that are left available for us to sift and sort through to try to build things with. So that would be one issue you have with codependency that's end time related. That is not to do with so-called childhood wounds. It's just it has to do with just trying to cope, to survive, to get along, to find God's will for our life. So forms of codependency that have little to nothing to do with so-called childhood wounds that you have. One of them having to do with just how evil everything is, and trying to be healthy, actually. Trying to tolerate, trying to be godly, be an example, grow something, build something wonderful in the world, will be called codependency, just because there's nothing left. But people don't want to say that, and people can't see that a lot of times because they don't understand where we are generationally, where we are in a decadent society. Maybe it would be different in third world countries somewhere. Maybe people would be more family-based, more selfless. Who knows? But I believe that would be one misconception about what so-called codependency is, and very closely related. It's all related to what time we're in and what we're actually trying to do. That really has nothing to do with, in my opinion, with these so-called childhood wounds. I think where people were talking about childhood wounds a lot in psychology about 60 years ago, where that came in as they were trying to divide up the home and blame everything on parenthood and everything on parents. That was a social Marxism thing, and I'm not saying the parents were excellent and good and all that and that there weren't wounds, because by then we were deep into like our second generation of end time social Marxism. So yes, there was a lot of parenting issues for sure, but it was all like a multi-pronged approach to separate and divide out the family. So every single thing psychologically, spiritually had to be blamed on parents versus children. So there was over blame on parenting being so wrong. And so maybe that's one of the reasons why codependency will be blamed on, well, those are childhood wounds where your parents wounded you and didn't take care of you properly. But it's deeper. It's deeper than that. It's the time we're in. It's so evil, trying to cope in even in extremely healthy ways in the very end times, the last days, where much of the foundations have been destroyed. That's what you're actually looking at. So a lot of our, in my opinion, a lot of our healthy reactions to the world, godly, empathetic, beautiful, helpful, hopeful reactions in the world, would become codependent when other people are so dysfunctional, unhealthy, taken over by evil, living in fantasy, addicted, and extremely selfish, and have formed idols and have made an idol of themselves and things like that. So that's a big reason for so-called codependency, is just being normal in an extremely wicked time. Like I say, that gets to my second point of codependency, of things being blamed as codependent. A lot of times you will be called codependent because you are a nurturer, man or woman, probably mostly women. And I'm not going to get sexist as much as I would say go look up the statistics yourself, and Dr. Romani also agrees, sadly. But maybe the other end of the spectrum is the women have their own issue that hasn't been identified yet in codependency more, but being a nurturer in the wrong balance, because we're not taught the proper balance with the fear of God, and effeminacy, not men trying to be women effeminacy, but the kind of effeminacy that the Bible talks about and Ann Barnhart talks about. I would suggest go checking out her video, Ann Barnhart, of diabolical narcissism. That I don't maybe necessarily agree with the depth that she goes on everything in that, and I definitely don't agree with her Catholicism, but I appreciate her discourse there on diabolical narcissism of the end times. It's another person trying to shed some light on what's happening here. But being effeminate, being soft, where we get our softness from is being overly nurturing, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know, on its face. We should have nurturers, and a lot of them, but being super overly nurturing and caring and loving in an environment where we've forgotten the fear of God and hell first. That is first, as far as putting everything else into perspective. The fear of God will be the beginning of knowledge and wisdom, in that will put the perspective for us where we can't see everything the way that we should. We can't. There's no way we can see everything. So whenever we see idolatry enough, we have to get away. So the opposite of effeminacy, as far as the Bible teaching goes, is some form of strength and virility and power, of not to go the other extreme and become power hungry, get lost in that and thinking that's godliness, but a strength of character, of being able to put the nurturer on the back burner, the tough love, and say no, and say not now, and point out that this is wrong and that's wrong, and we can't go forward with nurturing. So our natural goodness that God gives us, and even animals, to nurture, you know, some animals in some cases, even that goodness is being misused and misapplied in end-time evil because of the lack of the fear of God and understanding, and foundations destroyed. So in other words, I think what I'm saying there is, I believe a lot of people are calling things codependent that are actually natural and good in a healthy environment with proper teaching. It's not always you're wounded and you have childhood wounds. That's the insight I would give. And that would be a little bit more details that may help you to understand what's really going on, is that our natural tendency to nurture and love and give and find good and salvage and build and grow can be taken all out of, can be seriously taken advantage of in a situation where we've lost a lot of spiritual truth, where the foundations have been destroyed, and where there's so much evil that has generationally taken over, unfortunately. Just wanted to share that really quick, and hopefully that helped. The quote from Quentin about someone who will rudely discard you, they're going to search for you everywhere and they're never going to find you, and they're never going to be happy. And that's the truth, first of all, of what they've done to God, what they've done between themselves and God in reality. I really wanted to share that because I've never delved into codependency as many years as I worked on narcissism, because what people were saying about it never made sense. So what I've shared here basically very quickly, that makes sense to me for once. That we're trying to call even healthy traits codependency because simply people are not realizing the depth of what time we're in, which is why I've named the channel here like I have, End Time Warriors. Also why I would get into end times and prophecy so much in my narcissist channel before, because only with the understanding of what time we're in, how far we've gone, how much evil has taken over for how long, to what depth, and how deeply the foundations are destroyed, which we don't always need to focus on that. It's just an understanding, a wise backdrop of understanding to keep us maybe navigating properly with everything, is to understand that. Otherwise you get caught up one way or the other in some level of misunderstanding, in my opinion. And I don't really criticize people for not focusing on how evil it's gotten. I appreciate people who will roll that dice and gamble and try to build something good from all of the issues and problems that are going on, you know, and they're trying to build good here or there, and they're trying to salvage what's left, and a lot of people will probably get rewards for doing that. So I don't always want to be a prophet of doom or anything, but I do believe that there is so much chaos and disaster that those of us who feel led to expose more light, that's going to be a little part of it, is to expose what you're actually facing a lot of times, because what time we're really in. And also, for example, it's also helped me a lot, and you know, it may just be the way I am, that deeply edifies myself, it deeply edifies me. So maybe it will edify others or others like me, that every time, like, I guess it's the teacher in me, and for the people that are like that and think and analyze like that naturally and can't help it, that whenever there's a huge piece of the puzzle missing, it just really helps for that last piece of the puzzle to lock into place. It helps you know how to make your decisions, what you're really looking at, what's really going on around you. Walk circumspectly, redeem the time. Redeeming the time most valuably, to understand, oh, okay, this is where we're really at. Okay. To me, it cuts out a lot of waste, a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety, and points me straight to the answer. The only answer is going to be the Lord. So I hope this helped you guys. Feel free to leave comments if you have any feedback or questions, in case I'm able to help. I hope you guys are all having a really good day or night wherever you are.